IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories, India's very own travel podcast, where each week we share the journey of travelers in their own words and relive their experiences with you, our listeners.
Hey guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Musafir Stories. On the podcast today, we have the pleasure of hosting a very dear listener, Amruta Dhalkar. Amruta is a museologist and shares some wonderful snippets about travel to this very significant yet underrated town in Maharashtra. So pack your bags and put on your shoes, or should I say your chappals, as we set out to explore this beautiful city in India. Let's hop onto the episode now. So with that introduction, we'd love to welcome Amruta Dhalkar, a traveler and museologist from Mumbai/Bangalore, I can say, I guess. But Amruta, thank you so much for being a part of the Musafir Stories and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's like a fan girl moment for me. I've been following your podcast since pretty long. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you, Amruta. It's because of guests like you and listeners like you that Musafir Stories has happened in the first place. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be around. So thank you so much for listening and now finally coming on the show as well. But Amruta, the intro I gave about you was pretty short and concise. So why don't you speak a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Okay, cool. So I am in the profession of museums and heritage. I have been working in the field for last 5 years. I predominantly work for upcoming museum projects, so I get to explore a lot of things like whatever the subjects are upcoming museum. I do research, I speak with designers, and it's an exciting journey. And because of this, probably my profession, I get to travel, I get to explore new ideas and new histories, new stories. So this is my story.
Wonderful. Really looking forward to this, and does sound like a very exciting job as well. And we'll kind of get a sense of that as we speak more during the course of the conversation. Now, we have a little tradition of the Musafir Stories, Amruta, and you probably know about this being a listener as well, that usually we request our guest who's on the show to tell us where you're taking us and the other listeners to this time around. So where are you taking us to?
So today we are going to Kolhapur, one of the famous cities in Western Maharashtra. People might be knowing it for Kolhapuri Chappal, but believe me, Kolhapur is beyond Kolhapuri Chappal. There are so many things to do, to explore, to eat in Kolhapur. Kolhapur is for everyone. If you are a sports person, if you are a foodie, if you are a historian, if you are a theatre artist, visual artist, you name it, and there is something to offer to you in Kolhapur.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm definitely looking to discover and explore Kolhapur beyond the Kolhapuri chappals, right? The jutis, like you said, that's what most of us, and especially me being an ignorant city fellow from down south, that's what I've been exposed to. But really looking forward to this episode. And during the course of my research as well, I really stumbled upon a lot of gems. So really excited to be talking more about this. Now, tell us, for some of our listeners who might not know where exactly Kolhapur is located, please tell us in terms of the geographical orientation as well, where Kolhapur is.
So Kolhapur is in western Maharashtra, which is near to the Sahyadris. Actually, Kolhapur district is bordering district with Karnataka, and you can reach here by train, by flights. There's airport in the city, and buses. If you're traveling from Bangalore, Mumbai, Pune, all the major cities are connected with Kolhapur very easily.
Wonderful. So accessibility-wise, it's pretty accessible both by road as well as trains and flights. And in terms of the time of the year when one should perhaps plan a trip, when would you suggest one travels?
So I would say immediately after rainy season would be great. So you can visit places where you want to see the natural beauty and explore all those things. But in general, if you want to visit after September till February, it's great time to visit Kolhapur.
Okay, yeah. Maharashtra, I guess in general, right, it has a very different feel and flavor to it, especially after the monsoons. So,
Right.
probably the best time to go and discover Kolhapur during that time. Thank you so much for setting us the context of the place, both in terms of where it's located as well as a good time to get there. Now, quickly speaking about some of the background in terms of the history of the place as well, right? It has a very rich history, as I found out too while looking up. Do you want to set some context there so that our journey exploring Kolhapur becomes easier to follow, Amrita?
That would be cool actually. We can, rather, I would like to explore a bit about the name of the Kolhapur, and from there on, we can jump on to the material part of it. So, there's this interesting myth, which is like colloquial or which is locally told about Kolhapur. So, there was a demon called Kolhasur, and he was torturing people. Then Mahalakshmi or Ambabai, which is the also famous temple in Kolhapur, she came and she saved the people of this area from the wrath of Kolhasur demon. And it was his dying wish that this city or this area should be named after him. Hence, the town name got Kolhapur. The Pur is town, and from Kolhasurs, the Kolha is a name. So, two conjoining,
Right.
it became Kolhapur. There's another name which we find in the history book. It's called Brahmagiri. It is probably a small settlement in Kolhapur area. And so that name we find in many of the history books. Another name which is very famous is that for that area is Karvir. Many of the time, the Mahalakshmi or the Ambabai is referred as Karvir Nivasini, as in the one who is staying in the Karvir area. So these are the names of the cities. So people were very fascinated about this Brahmagiri name, and this was coming in Puranas. This was coming in so many books, historic books. So people decided to excavate here. One of the famous archaeologist H.D. Sankalia excavated in this part of Brahmagiri, which is on the banks of Panchaganga river, and there he found a statue or sculpture of Poseidon. Poseidon is Greek deity of the sea. So this tells a story between two cities, two countries, how Greek travelers found a way to come to India for the trade of spices, clothes, gems, and whatnot. So this trade, while they are trading or while they are in the sea ships, they always used to carry their god of sea with them, and probably it got exchanged somewhere. Now this is not just the one-way exchange. There is another way exchange. So there was this famous town called Tagara, which was again a trading city. Today it is in the small village called Ter in Usmanabad district. So there they found an ivory handle of the mirror. So one of the identical twin of that mirror handle, is found in one of the excavations in Pompeii. So this shows that there was a two-way trade, and Kolhapur was one of the eminent city of this international trade part. So this is the history of Kolhapur. There are so many mentionings of Kolhapur from Satvana period, Chalukya period, Rashtrakuta period, Shilahara period. Shilahara is a very important period in Kolhapur's history, and then Maratha rule. So this is the brief history of Kolhapur. I'm just telling all these things to set a context to what we will be talking further.
Yeah, no, definitely very useful, and it's fascinating to find about the trade or important place Kolhapur, or Brahmagiri as it was known back then, I guess, held in the trade routes as well, all the way from Europe to here, right? So thanks so much for setting that context. And like you mentioned, the Shilahara period, and even after that, primarily the period of the Marathas, that'll something I guess that'll be most prominent in the places we see, given that it's the more recent history. So really looking forward to exploring this with you. In terms of the points of interest or places one should check out, where do you think one should start exploring Kolhapur?
I would say we should start with Mahalakshmi temple. It is at a city center, and actually whole city revolves now around this. It's very famous temple, which was probably built around 7th, 8th centuries, and then renovated after that. Then the fortification wall came in. Very interesting is to see the sculptures on this temple. They are really amazing. Then there is jali work. My mother used to tell me that if you go in this temple and if you try to count all the pillars of the temples, you cannot. You will definitely miss something. So all the mandapa decorative pillars is something to worth visiting and worth seeing. The sculpture of the goddess is also very beautiful. There's one mace in her hand, one citrus fruit which is called marunga, then one shield-like thing called khetaka, and in one of her hand is panapatra, which is like a bowl. Actually, Vaishnavite and Shaivite, both the sects relate to this deity. People who are coming from Shaivite faith, they usually visit Mahalakshmi with Jyotiba temple, which is on one of the hillock in Kolhapur. People who are coming from Vaishnavite sect or faith, they usually visit Mahalakshmi with Tirupati. So these are the combinations which we easily see. But what important thing you can see here is there are two amazing sculptures of Mahalakshmi, Mahasaraswati and Mahakali in the same temple. This is definitely one of the important temple in the Shakti Upasana. And in this temple, the main part of the temple is the darwazas. Actually, there's a very interesting thing happens here around 31st January, 2nd February or first few days of November. There is thing called Kiranotsav. So the temple it is designed in certain way that when sun is falling or sun is setting, it actually, the rays of sun reaches the main deity, and that is called Kiranotsav. The deity is bathed in sun rays, and it's a marvel, it's a wonder of architecture that everyone should see. It's very beautiful. People are lined up in temple, people are standing in Sabha Mandap, who wants to or gets to see the this thing happening. So it's really beautiful. I would highly recommend going on the Kirnotsav days. It's fun also. Then another day where people will go gaga over here is Lalita Panchami, the 5th day of Navratri. So overall, it's a Shakti Pit. It's one of the 3.5 Shakti Pit. It's called in Marathi Sade Teen Shakti Pitha. It's one of the Pith from those. So it has immense importance in general Shakti Upasana. So if you're coming here in Navratri, it's a gala time. Especially on the 5th day of Navratri, temple is totally decorated with lights. People are flocking around, wearing new clothes, and it's all festive environment. It's not that you're only going to see temple. Around the temple, there is a market area. So market is also like around this time, it's beautiful. There are flowers, there are sellers of chappals, and like you name it and you will find it around the market. So this is what Mahalakshmi temple is. Check it out.
Yeah, very important, both from religious perspective, like Amrita mentioned, and even me, right? I like a couple of friends I knew who knew Kolhapur beyond the chapels. The first thing they mentioned was, yes, we've been to this Mahalakshmi temple, and like you mentioned, I guess the Vaishnavite sect, for them it's considered a part of the journey they make to Tirupati, like visiting the Mahalakshmi temple or the Ambabai temple is actually completing that that pilgrimage of sorts, you could say, right? So really important and pretty unique architecture wise as well. So those interested in architecture can check it out too. There is definitely influences of the Chalukyas or the Chalukyan period, I would say. So it has some similarities to temples you might see in the south as well, just given the location too. But overall, right, like you're mentioning, a really important place and a great place to start off the exploration of Kolhapur, the city, and the places around as well. Now that one has spent some time here and perhaps also checking out the little market around the temple, picking up a few things, what would you suggest we do next, or the place we visit next?
I would say Old Palace because it's just 2 minutes away from Mahalakshmi temple.
Okay.
So Maratha kingdom had two gadis or two thrones after the demise of Rajaram Maharaj. His wife, Taranani Devi, she took Karobar in her hands. She was fierce lady. She was the daughter of Sarsenapati Hambirrao Mohite, who was one of the eminent person in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaja's darbar. And she was very brave lady. She took matters in her hand. She fought mighty Mughals. It wasn't easy for a lady to do all these things, and she sat, like her throne was in Kolhapur. So there was Old Palace, which is near this Mahalakshmi temple. Old Palace or Bhavani Mandap, because Bhosle family's cooler deity or Kula Devat is Turja Bhavani. So short form is Bhavani Mata. So this mandap or this particular part of palace is known as a Bhavani Mandap. It was earlier only for the royal family. So whenever there is Dasra Mahotsav happening, the royal family would definitely visit here along with their royal scions or whoever related to the royal family. So remnants of this old palace are there. Unfortunately, the original structure was caught up in a fire, but still, whatever is there, whatever is remnant, it is worth visiting. The doorways, the door jambs are very beautiful. The jali work there is beautiful. You can see the typical Maratha architecture there. Even after it got burned down, they're reusing it for the schools. The famous school called Rajaram High School is still hosted in the same building. If the school is not happening or if there is a chutti, you can definitely visit in. It's beautiful inside. So I would highly suggest going to this old palace and exploring Bhavani Mandap. If you enter into Bhavani Mandap, there are some taxidermy objects. So people or the kings in then times used to go on shikar. So you may find bear, chitta or tigers, and then they are stuffed and the trophies are kept in this palace. There's a very beautiful painting of Rajarshi Shahu Maharaj in Bhavani Mandap. So it's worth visiting, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And also, just for some reference to the listeners, right? I mean, even I had to look it up because I think sometimes with the names it gets so confusing with especially the Maratha Empire. Basically, it was Chhatrapati Shivaji's two sons, I guess, right? Sambhaji and Rajaram. And
Yes.
the two of them basically had their own capitals or their lineages. Like one was in Satara, that's where
Yes.
I guess Sambhaji and Shahu, his son Shahu, Chhatrapati Shahu's kingdom kind of flourished there, and it was Rajaram and his wife Tara Devi or Tara Rani Devi, her kingdom or place was here, right? In Kolhapur, that's where they set up, yeah.
So just to explore a bit on this part, actually after the demise of Rajaram Maharaj, these two gadis came in existence. So the first son of Shivaji Maharaj is Sambhaji Maharaj, who was on throne I think after 1680 to 1689. Post that, Chhatrapati Rajaram Maharaj came on the throne. He was on the throne till 1700. After his demise, Mughals actually were still fighting with Marathas, like the remnants of Marathas. I think after the demise, these two Gadis were created. What tactful thing Mughals did is they released the son of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj, who was Shahu, as you mentioned, Shahu Maharaj. And when he came in Swaraj, he thought that he's a rightful heir to lead now Maratha Swaraj. And then actually these two Gadi came into being. One is Kolhapur Gadi, which Maharani Tara Rani laid, and one Gadi, Satara Gadi, which Chhatrapati Shahu laid.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just good to have this reference as we kind of delve into it because the name of Rajarshi Shahu will reappear, which might confuse a few people. So it's not the same person. He's like 3 or 4 generations down, but belonging to the Kolhapur or that lineage, right? Just wanted to call that out. But yeah, really important place. And this is the old palace, right? As well as the temple, which is the... I'm sorry, you mentioned the Bhavani temple, right? The Bhavani Mandap.
Yes, Bhavani
So that's
Mandap.
what it is called. Yeah, and really close by in the vicinity of the Mahalakshmi temple. So easy for somebody to cover this off together while you're checking out the Mahalakshmi temple. Now, having spent some time, any other callouts here, or where do you want to head off to from here?
I would say if we have seen the old palace, why not see the new palace? So
Yeah.
actually, there was a British architect called Major Mant who was into designing this palace particularly. So this new palace took 7 years to complete, from 1877 to I guess 1884. This is beautiful confluence of European and Maratha or native architecture here. So you may find arches, you may find columns. The way type would sound look like very colossal European, but the elements are very much Indian. The mahirab or the doorways, the entrances, or the depictions which come on there are very much Indian. So it's like the soul of this land is encaptured in the designs. So it's a great place to see and start. It is totally built in black polished stone. The entire palace campus is huge. Earlier there was a zoo, there's a garden, then there's a wrestling ground, then there is a lake in the palace area, and then there are some teeny tiny structures in and around the palace. So we are entering into the palace, and like suddenly from the city bustling areas, we're entering into this calm and quieter area. So if you go into the palace, on the ground floor there is a museum, and on the upper floor and one part of the residence is still used by the royal family, and we will talk about that very soon. But before we talk about that, we must see the museum is really beautiful. Actually, what it houses is really important thing. The collection of costumes, regalia costumes, what people would wear on throne while they're sitting on ambaris, or sitting in ambaris on the elephants. What elephants would be wearing is also on display, and these are not just the clothes. These are silver zool or silver or ornamented, totally ornamented clothes that elephants are wearing. So it's really mesmerizing to see. Then there are games, then there are paintings, saddle. So all these things you get to see. Then there is a furniture. Palace furniture is amazing. I mean, I cannot stop using amazing and beautiful words again and again, but I cannot, control this. So
Yeah.
old photos are there. Visiting this palace will actually give you a good context of what this lineage is about, and it will stop your confusion when you hear all the names again and again, because there might be Shivaji Maharaj the 4th or 5th, there might be Shahu Maharaj. Again and again you will be listening these names. So seeing this photo, putting faces to the names would really help. These photos are also from diverse variety. There would be coronation photos, there would be some political visit photos, there would be some British officers coming here, there would be some shikar photos. Then one must visit Darbar Hall of this palace. Darbar Hall is actually a two-storied thing. There is a balcony on upper story, and then there are chairs and setup, and the place where crown would sit, or Sinhasan is there. This palace also has a beautiful collection of stained glasses in which the episodes from the life of Maharaja Shivaji are depicted. So they are also contextualizing them with the dream, or with the dream of Swaraj of Maharaja Shivaji, and it's like setting a tone for this darbar, like what they are talking about, what is their like goal in general, and where they are coming from. Also, the work here, the plaster work, you can see the spiraling pillar. Then there is embellishment which are done in plaster. There are so many flowers, birds depicted here. So you just take a seat there, or just stand there for a few moments in silence, and just it'll take time for sink in, but it's worth going there. So it's very beautiful. Then you come out in the garden and see the whole palace from the front. There is in the center near the porch there's a tower, and on that tower you will see a clock. Also, I forgot to mention that near Bhavani Mandap there is also a clock. The numbers of these clocks are in Devanagari, and which is rare, because whatever clocks we may see on colonial era buildings or any other buildings, either they would be in English or Roman.
Right.
But
right.
here, since common people would be referring to it, people were very foresighted. So they are actually in Devanagari. So like how the native people would write and read and see the clock and act accordingly, In the campus, if you are lucky, you will see the Maybach. The Maybach car, which was brought in 1932. And this is the car every year paraded on the day of Dasra, which is the 10th day of Navratri. And it is very beautiful. It is decked with this royal insignia, regalia. It is like a bit of a yellow color car, and I think it's the only model available in India of that kind. It's very beautiful. So if you want to see it, either you will, at times, if you are lucky, you will see it faring around the palace, but you will definitely see in Dasra Mahotsav, because they parade it out. So
Yeah.
that is thing. Then you can also see Khasbagh. Now, Rajarshi Shahu Maharaj, who was a visionary king who brought education in the town, who brought all the amenities in the town, who actually inspired many people, who brought social reforms in the town. Actually, his views paved the way for modernity in Kolhapur, frankly speaking. He was a visionary king. So when he went to Rome and he saw those colossal amphitheaters or grounds, he was totally amazed with it. And he thought, why not my people do these things? And we have famous thing called kusti or kusti akhadas are there. And Shahu Maharaj actually inspired so many people to take the wrestling as a career or wrestling practices in general. He opened more than 100, or he encouraged people opening akhadas. So many people were trained here. The first Indian Olympic medal winner in the wrestling was from Kolhapur, or was from trained in Kolhapur, Khashaba Jadhav. So there's this rich history which is associated with whole akhada, and he then created a place which is like colossal, and where 25,000 people can sit or stand and watch this kusti. So he took it to altogether another level, this entire game. So it's called Khasbag Maidan. Khas is like the word meaning Khasbag, it's special garden. The special garden area was actually for the royal family, but he opened it for the public and arranged wrestling things here, and also cultural activities here. So
Yeah.
this is the palace which you will be seeing, and this is new palace.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to unpack and unravel there. You can easily use up a few hours of the day, or probably the entire day as well, spending time here, depending on your interest. And obviously, the name that popped up most while you were explaining this was Rajarshi Shahu Maharaj, or Chhatrapati, right? And
Right.
he was one of the most prominent Maharajas of Kolhapur, I believe. The title of Maharaj of Kolhapur, he was the first one who actually got that. Before that, it was all Raja of Kolhapur. And like you said, almost like he was obviously the king, but even more than that, like a social reformer of sorts, right? A
Right,
lot
right.
of things that he did. And one of the things, important things, I saw that he was actually one of the persons who actually supported Dr. Ambedkar quite a bit
Yes,
in his
yes.
movement, and also one of the first persons actually to bring in a reservation for the backward classes back in 1902, I believe, is when he kind of pushed for these changes. So a lot of things way ahead of his times, and no wonder that he's actually still one of the most admired and most recognized people. And obviously his liking for hunting and wrestling is also clearly shown, and Khasbag is a living example of that. So thank you for calling all of those things out. But yeah, just one of the very prominent personalities of Kolhapur, I would say, is Rajarshi Shahu Maharaj. So thanks so much for calling all of those things out, Amrita. And yeah, how can we forget the Maybach as well? It's very, very I guess iconic from the Dasara celebration. It's I think one of the unique ways in which Dasara celebrated around the country, and Kolhapur has its own version of it, where the royal family actually goes up to this Dasara Chowk, I believe is what it's called.
Yes.
And they also have this ceremony where they exchange the leaves of, I forget the name, I think it's called the
Aptechi Pano.
right. So that's also very something I found very unique, especially being from Bangalore, and with the vicinity, or with the close vicinity to Mysore we live in. We have seen our version of Dasara, but this was also very good to learn about and know about. Now, having spent some time here, again, like I said, depending on your interest, one could easily spend from a few hours to perhaps the full day exploring the new palace and the different things around the new palace. Where next to? What do you think we should check out next?
I would say roam around in the town. Like, it would surprise you on every probably chalk or every chauraha. So there are so many pates or puris, which are like, I'm just saying it in multiples, but which are like parts of town, like Shahpuri, Rajarampuri, and all those places, which whatever we spoke about Kolhapur in general, you will find in these areas. There would be food, there would be shopping market, there would be old vadas, which are actually native architectural style, which influence this Rajvada or the palace. So I remember actually my mama stayed in Kolhapur. So me going to Kolhapur wasn't just one trip. It is like over the time I was going to Kolhapur this summer vacation or that Diwali vacation. So we happened to visit this Munishwar Vada, which is actually the old Vada, and there are some old temple which now if I could see, they had the Chalukya influence, the disc-like pillars and the heavy stone work, jali work is still there. And in around that the vada is designed, and then there are certain chalks in which the family stays. Some part of vada is now given to the school, some part of vada is now given to the social activities, but still the main door of vada is intact. The living apartments of this vada is intact, and there flourished the unique Kolhapuri culture. People are like very open to show them around. They, if you just ask them, they will let you in. You will see even their doors of the houses are pretty old and very decorative, carved in wood. And it's just not like these architectural monuments or whatever objects we see, they are not just telling the story of that bygone era, they're talking to you again. Like they must have talked to those people for whom they were made, and they are now talking to us, like how we interpret them or how we relate to them in this era. So it's very beautiful. Taking a walk around in city is, I would say, the next you can do. After that, I would suggest, now you know a little bit of history, Mahalakshmi temple and everything, going to town hall would be best, because it'll unfold the history of Kolhapur. Like whatever we spoke about, the Satwan era, the excavation, all the findings of those excavation is in town hall. Again, town hall is a neo-Gothic structure which is built by Major Mant, who also built the new palace, as we said earlier.
Right.
So whatever was found in the excavation of Brahmagiri area, the old Kolhapur area, is kept in this museum. It's a very beautiful museum. There's a fountain in front of the museum, then there's a garden. So going into a museum is experience in itself. Like this is not a boring museum for sure. So when you enter, you will see that sculpture of Poseidon, which I had earlier mentioned, in the main hall of the museum. And there they will explain the story of the trade, how Poseidon came here and what is Poseidon and everything. Then there are some potteries and which were found in excavation. Then there are some sculptures over the time collected in and around Kolhapur. They will tell a story like how many people came here, what is the concept of those people of beauty. You will not just seek the sculpture of deities, but you will also look at their, again I'm saying this, but drapery, their jewels, how their emotions are captured in this sculpture is totally out of this world, like amazing. So visiting this museum is worthwhile. Not only the ancient things, but you will also find the coins, paintings, current paintings. Abalal Rahman's paintings are in this museum. Then you will find ivory filigree work. So this museum, you need a really dedicated time to see this museum.
Yeah, definitely. I'll take that recommendation coming from a museologist. But yeah, museums definitely do open us up to a whole new world in a sense, right? It just takes us back in time, and also, if done nicely, it almost becomes like a literally a storytelling experience that they actually give out, right? Taking you from that whole journey through time, the different things that the city or the place went through, etc. So it's really great, and looks like Town Hall Museum is just the right one to kind of learn more about Kolhapur as well. Having spent some time at this, again, in terms of getting around, is this a little way off from the new palace, or how far away is it?
I would say 5 to 6 kilometers. I may not be right, but you can just catch an auto or book a car or anything and go around. I would highly suggest traveling by local transport also, because you get to meet so many people. People would be wearing petas and sadra, kurta. Women would be wearing irkal sari and their way of putting green bangles and everything. It's like, it's a photo essay in itself, traveling by local transport. So I highly would recommend it. And people are so courteous. If you ask them anything, they are ready with information. They are ready with their fair share of stories.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's some great advice. But for somebody who doesn't speak Marathi, can one get by with Hindi, you think?
Yes, Hindi is easily understood here, and people might not speak fluent Hindi, but they would definitely try and make you understand what they're talking about.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling that out. And now that we've spent some time going around the Town Hall Museum, where would you suggest we hop on to next?
Since we are talking about museums, and I am all about museums, I would definitely recommend now 3-4 more museums in Kolhapur.
Okay.
So Kolhapur, as we all know, that it was city of films. Actually, very interestingly, the first movie which was made in India, like actually shot in India, was Pundalik, which was shot in Kolhapur. But the processing of that film happened in London in 1912. That's why we don't call it a first Indian cinema. And that's why Raja Harishchandra, which was like first Indian cinema, which was shot and processed here entirely, it became a first cinema. So Kolhapur has been like motherland for like all this film city. There are film studios, old film studios. There are painters and artists who are involved in this new media, and then there are famous actors. Like all these things are happening in Kolhapur. So one of the famous actor in Marathi film industry was Chandrakant Mandre. This was a brother duo, Chandrakant Mandre and Suryakant Mandre. And oh my god, like you should see their cinemas. People were really mad for them. They were like altogether different fan craze they were experiencing. So Chandrakant Mandre joined a film company called Maharashtra Company, which was again opened by the renowned artist Baburao Painter. This is again a big name. He's artist himself, visual artist. He directed some film and produced some films. So Chandrakant Mandre joined his film company and started acting in Marathi film cinema. So he was, along with this all acting thing, he was himself a painter. And he had done more than 350 to 400 canvases. And he was living in Kolhapur. And in his last times in Kolhapur, he decided to give all his paintings and his house to government of Maharashtra to actually display his painting and run a cultural center which would encourage people. So I'm talking about Chandrakant Mandre Museum. So if you go in this museum, there is a little biography of the actor displayed there. There are some photos, but majorly there are his canvases, which are water, oil, acrylic, and he also worked in powder shading medium. If you go and see it, it is explained there in detail. Also, this Kolhapur artist, the jaggery making or sugarcane fields are like everywhere. So if you're seeing any painting done by Kolhapuri artist, he has to paint one of the jaggery making painting. Otherwise, he is not Kolhapuri artist. So you will find so many of these around also. Once we see Chandrakant Mandre Museum, we are talking about film industry. There's another entity which was very famous and which was spearheading Marathi film industry around, let's say, 1930 onwards, or rather more than that. It's Bhalji Pendharkar. So his film, which was produced in 1965, I guess, Sadhi Mansa, people went there, cried, and the whole film was like a bigger superstar hit. He did Bajirao Mastani, by the way, in 1925, which very few of us know of this generation. Then he did, of course, movies on Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, which are somewhere in the archives, which you can see. So he was one of the eminent filmmaker in Maharashtra in general. So another museum which is dedicated to his work, his life, is Bhalji Pendharkar Museum. It's a personalia museum which is dedicated to a person. So there you can see his photos, his writing, what he was playing around story, like his actual handwriting is there. His belongings are there. So you get to see the person in process actually. Like what was his process? How was this person like who actually made these huge movies and which made this huge impact on people at that point of time. This is another museum, and there is one more museum which I need to talk about. Sorry.
Okay.
So this is a museum which is near an ancient temple of Shankar. It's called Kaneri Math Museum. So it is actually a unique museum which actually showcases the life of village. So many things are happening in village. How people stay in their villages, how people handle their cattle herds, how people play, how children play, how they celebrate Diwali, or how the revenue system works. So we usually read in history books like how a 200-year-old village must have ran, I mean, by the people like revenue officers or anything. But we don't understand it much because we don't have a visual context to it. So this museum have actually created life-size statues of people who are taking palanquins, who are celebrating Diwali, the house of revenue officer, the house of probably person who make the potteries, the house of person who is dealing with metals, what the tools they actually made. So in going in these details and showing you actual village which have existed 200 years ago, is you're literally walking in that village. It's an open air museum and you're walking in the
Right.
village. So it's one of its kind experience and must visit. It's not a like heavy reading museum, but it's like an experience museum.
Yeah, definitely. I think somebody who's a lover of museums can have their hearts fill. Now that we have covered a bunch of things, maybe on the first 2 or 3 days or whatever it is of your itinerary, let's take a quick commercial break at this point and we'll be right back on the other side. All right, we're back on the podcast talking to Amrita Dhalkar about exploring Kolhapur, and she's really taken us around and given us a flavor of Kolhapur, right from the royal connections to the palaces to the museums to the temples and whatnot. But hold on to your breath, it's not done. There's so much more to explore. Now, after having gone through the museums, where next to, Amrita?
I would say now people must be hungry. And if I don't talk about Kolhapur food or cuisine here, nobody's taking me again back in Kolhapur. So you must, like the moment you step in Kolhapur, you must have the misal. The famous misal joint is Fadtare misal joint. You ask anyone, like anyone in Kolhapur, they will directly direct you to the Fadtares. Like you don't need to know the address, kind of.
Okay.
Then there's very famous guest house. It's called Padma Guest House. People who are foodies about non-veg, they should definitely eat tamda rasa and pandra rasa. It's basically mutton stock. The pandra rasa is mutton stock fused with coconut milk, and tamra rasa is stock with a spicy thing, and it's served with bhakri or at times mutton or like whatever really fancies you. But tamda pandra rasa is must have again. Then bhed. Raja Bauchi Bhed. There's this food joint called person called Raja Bau or food joint called Raja Bau, and the bhed there is very famous. Even if you're strolling by Mahalakshmi temple, you will find so many chat options and around. There are milk cold drink is like go-to place if you're going. So there's so much to eat. Like every time you want something, there's something to eat. So these three things, misal, bhed, and tamda pandra rasa is like identity of Kolhapur. So we must have it. Since
Yeah.
we're talking about food, there's another very famous thing called doodh katta. So people who have their buffaloes or they will bring in the evening to do the doodh katta. We talked about this akhada culture, the kushti culture, the wrestling culture. So pehelwan
Right.
who have like till and toiled in the akhadas day long, they need something like proteins and everything.
Right.
So they will walk by these doodh katta streets, and in the evening directly like people would give them milk in the glasses. It's called dharoshna doodh. Like that's not pasteurized or that's not warmed or boiled or anything. It's like directly from the buffalo. You get it in the glass and you
Right.
drink it. So that part is called as a doodh katta, and it happens many like doodh kattas are there at many places. Like you have everything that you need in Kolhapur to eat.
Yeah, definitely very interesting concept. The doodh kattas, right? Fresh off the cattle or fresh off the buffalo, I guess. Just stand there and take it. Yeah, really, really interesting. And yeah, misal is something I've definitely heard a lot about. I guess it is prevalent across Maharashtra, like in other places in Maharashtra and across other places in India as well. But it's just that this is unique, right? The
Yes.
Kolhapuri misal. So do make sure you check that out along with the pandra rasa and the tamda rasa. Basically white curry and red curry, right? And
Yes,
it's
but-
non-vegetarian. Yeah.
Yes, it's made up of mutton stock predominantly.
Right. Yeah. So, foodies, you will have a gala time, right? There's definitely no dearth of food options, and definitely even in terms of variety, there's a lot of things for you to check out. And this is where we kind of miss out on Faza not being on the show. Otherwise, she would have a lot of good things to say about it. But yeah, now that we have kind of refueled and done a little bit of a refill, where next to can we head out from here?
So people might want to shop around in this area. So people would be definitely asking what we can take from the city to our homes, the souvenirs. So I would say there are so many things that you can buy here. Of course, Kolhapuri chappal is there. Basically, what is Kolhapuri chappal is famous for, though it is made up of leather, they don't use the metal khilas or what do you say? The nails, the
Yeah,
metal
nails,
nails.
yeah.
Yeah, they don't use while making these chappals. Also, there is this seeds of tree called vinsu that they stuff
Right.
in between two soles, and that's why when you walk, it makes that particular noise, and there you identify, oh, it's Kolhapuri chappal, it's authentic one. So you
Yeah.
have to be a little careful, or probably you can ask around people where to buy, what to buy. There are so many vendors sitting on the street also, so you can
Yeah.
buy as many Kolhapuri chappal as you want. Then there is a Kolhapuri saz. Kolhapuri saz is a kind of a necklace which is the design is pretty much developed here in Kolhapur. Like if you see all these temples, if you see all this old monuments, ancient monuments, the all the figurines there, if you see, they're full of their own ornaments, and it would have been like really surprising if Kolhapur wouldn't have developed their own unique taste in jewelry, right? So buying saz is amazing. So there are like this predominant Western Maharashtra jewelry, and Kolhapuri saz is among them.
Right.
Also, the fetas. So men usually in and around Kolhapur area, like probably in our earlier generation, would wear feta. Feta is kind of a turban which is
Yep.
put on head, and there's a particular style to it. So there are so many feta shops here, from regular fetas to ceremonial fetas to fetas like make you look like a prince are there. So you can go and buy them in general, like for probably festive occasion, marriages or anything. So these are the things to shop around in general in Kolhapur.
Yeah, definitely. Whatever you forget, don't forget grabbing a pair of Kolhapuri chappals. I think those are the most popular export of Kolhapur, and everybody around the country and perhaps even beyond would have heard of these. Very unique, great craftsmanship, obviously, but even like you mentioned, the sound they make, right? Because of those. Did you say those are seats? Is that
Yes,
what it
yes.
is?
Seeds sandwiched in the two soles.
Right, right, right. So it's very unique, but I believe now you even get versions of the slippers without those. But I guess it won't be quite Kolhapuri without the sound.
Right.
But yeah, definitely do make sure to grab a pair of these as well as you're shopping around. Yeah, food and shopping really two very, very critical and important parts of any journey. And I'm glad that Kolhapur has so much to offer. But any other call outs, shout outs for things to do within the city, Amrita, before we kind of start looking out beyond?
So now we go little out of the city center. There is a fort called Padnara, which is actually protecting fort of Kolhapur, which is sitting in the Sahyadris. Padnara fort is like very old fort, which was built around 12th century. It was built by Shilahar, and it was one of the strongest fort in their time that they had built. They had built a series of 15 forts, 15 forts, and this was one of the 15 forts. The Sage of Panara is a famous episode from the biography of Shivaji Maharaj. And in 1659, I think Shivaji Maharaj took Panara. Again in 1660, Siddhijor came and he actually put a sage around Panhara, and Shivaji Maharaj was actually inside the Panhara, and Siddhijor
Right.
actually is sitting with his army on the foothills of Panhara. But very interestingly, if you see the structure of this fort, there is Andhar Baudi. Literal translation is dark well, which is actually
Right.
a three-storied structure, and which fetch like wherever the fort needs water used to go from this Baudi, which is well. Then there were granaries there, which were named as Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati. These were big granaries which sustain the army of Shivaji Maharaj himself, and the Gao or the village which is on the fort. This was the fort which could sustain for 6 months with its water, with its ammunition which it had, and food it had in the Sage of Siddhi. That's why this is very important fort. Like it could sustain the village even if it is in need. Along with this, after like I think a couple of episodes, Shivaji Maharaj took it back. He actually lost one of his confidant named Baji Prabhu Deshpande in this war against Siddhi. He reached Vishargarh. So this is again a famous story, very heroic story, I would say.
Right.
If people reading this, they would know the importance of Panhara being in Swaraj, like why it was needed to be in Swaraj, or why anybody would want it in their rather like ruling area. So you must visit Panhara. It's not only a fort, it's not just a strategic location, but it's very scenic. Sitting in Sahyadri, it offers a view towards Konkan, the valleys, and if you're going around immediately after rainy season, it is totally covered with the fog at times. it's just beautiful. Then there is a place called Kalavantrinicha Mahal, which has like ornamented ceilings and very beautiful structure, which probably would have been probably would have been the quarters of the queen or something like that. After you're done with this, I would highly recommend, if you're going around August, September, to go to Masai Pathar, the plateau of Masai. People know about Kas Valley or Flower Valley. It is like a small plateau which is full of flowers around August and September. There are some sorts of orchids and some other flowers. And it's very beautiful, very, very scenic. Like all these painters whom I've said about, they used to come around this area and used to do landscapes. Like when you see the museums, you will see the landscape which have been done around Panhala, on the Panhala, and now you're going actually to the place. So if you cross connect all those things, they will definitely mesmerize you.
No, 100%. I think this is also a little bit of a lesser known gem, right? The plateau or the valley of flowers that you're saying, the plateau of flowers you're saying. Definitely something one should check out. And yeah, Panhala is also one of the very prominent places that gets associated to Kolhapur and the history, right? The Battle of Pawankind, I understand. That's the famous episode where Chhatrapati Shivaji basically escaped the siege on the fort, right? By
Right.
Siddhi Johar. So really, really important episodes in history. And even I believe Tarabai or Tara Devi, the Rani, she
Yes.
also spent some time here in her formative years. Definitely something to check out for, and perhaps almost a little bit of a hike, I would say, right, for somebody
absolutely.
visiting. Yeah, so easily one can spend several hours just exploring the fort and the different structures within the fort complex. Cool. This is a little way outside of the city, though, right? Amrita, that's what you said?
Yes, and there's another direction. Now we are going like a little out, about 60 kilometers though. But if you're in Kolhapur, you shouldn't miss this place. It's called Khidrapur village.
Okay.
You are going to see the architectural marvel here. It's called Kopeshwar temple, and there is another temple in the town which is called Adinath Jain Basadi or Adinath Jain temple. Both of these temples are very beautiful. Basically, we have talked about Shilahara earlier. They have given so many grants. Chalukya here, they actually created so many mammoth structures here. And some of the structures were over the time, people contributed to the main structures and become a bigger structure. We first see the Adinath Jain temple. We can see there are intricate carvings on the temple. There are human figures which are very beautiful. The entrances, everything. The Jali work, which is Chalukyas are very famous for that Jali work particularly. This is like little less explored part of the Khidrapur village. So I would say going to Adinath Jain Basadi is definitely a add-on.
Yeah.
Then moving to Kopeshwar temple. It's like people say it's a poetry carved in a stone. The temple had Swarga Mandap, Sabha Mandap, Antaral Kaksha and Garbhagruha. As you start walking in the temple, these are the mandapas that you're going to cross till you reach the Garbhagruha. And as if like the elephants are bearing the weight of this temple, there are 92 carved elephants on the base of this temple. Then the temple was, I think, later in some parts of it was renovated in Yadava's time, but we don't have like actual. I mean, I don't have the actual references of it as of now to say it for sure. If you enter in Swarga Mandap, you will see a Rangashila. Rangashila is like a circular elevation of few centimeters from the floor, and it is a circle of about let's say 13 feet diameter, and this is totally carved in one stone. That mammoth, that gigantic structure it is. And this Swarga Mandap is actually a circular vestibule which is like open to sky. So if you are standing on that Rangashila, you are actually seeing at this beauty like, oh my god, this is the door to heaven, like that beauty you see. The upper part of this pillar, the capitals are made of a disc-like structure. Then if you go in the middle part of these pillars, there are geometric motifs there. And then the lower part of the structure, you'll find foliage, some leaves, some flowers. But in general, when you see this all coming all together, then there are Ashtadikpas, like 8 deities of 8 directions. And this is totally made in black basalt. Then you will find motifs of crocodile, peacocks on the doorway. The Dwarpalas, like are so beautiful. Their jewelry is like, if you are a jewelry fan or if you like to hoard jewelry in general, they will get jealous of Dwarpalas. That much of intricate carving that jewelry is. Like, people who would have probably seen Harebedu, Belur, they must have seen this. So you will get the flavor of those jewelries in this temple. And when we are talking about the human figurines here, we should not miss on Sura Sundaris. So basically, these are beautiful women with their own identities. Or like, one of them is playing Grudangam. She's called as a Mardala. One of them is writing a letter. She's called as a Patra Lekhika or Patra Lekha. One of them is shown with the parrot. She's identified as a Shuka Sarika. One of them is a dancer. She's Nartaki. One of them is playing Veena. One of them is standing with a tree. There are so many poses, and in every pose they have beautifully like carved. So some of the Surya Sundaris are also seen playing Holi with Pichkari, the water gun. So it's like whole life of that village is reflected through this sculpture. The whole aesthetic language takes you to literally heaven, and hence the name of Swarga Mandap stands true to itself.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you said at the beginning as well, literally it's like poetry that's been sculpted, right? It's that beautiful and that detail oriented also. Thanks so much for kind of calling it out. Otherwise, it's easy for somebody without having enough background to kind of overlook some of these things. Obviously, they're all beautiful, but to kind of make sense of them, one can easily miss the messaging, right? So thanks so much for calling all of those out. The thing that stood out for me most was this Swarga Mantapa, and it's literally the open sky architecture, like you would say, right? It's almost like a
Right.
sunroof in your car. It's just an open circular place where through which you can look at the sun. It's just been so beautifully sculpted out, and I think very unique also. I haven't seen this as much in a lot of the temple architecture I've seen here, especially down south. So very, very unique, and I would say very underrated also. The temple, I haven't heard as much given how beautiful the temple is. And obviously, even in terms of just the name of it also, right? Kopeshwar, I think it stands for an angry form of Shiva. I think you've given us a really, really great flavor, a great sense of the Kolhapur city in general, as well as the things in the vicinity that one can check out. Any final thoughts or places that you would want to add before we start closing this off, Amrita?
Yes, we must talk about water heritage of Kolhapur. So what I mean by water heritage is like the places which are near the bigger water bodies. So there is one, of course, Panchaganga River. So Panchaganga Ghat is very famous. There are temples. So in childhood, actually, when we used to travel from Konkan, there is this Shivaji bridge which connects this Panhala or Konkan part to Kolhapur actually. Which is built on the Panchaganga River. So when we used to travel, and if it is a rainy season, we used to see, oh, acha, these temples have gone under the water. So that means there had been like a lot of rain in the town. But these temples are very beautiful. They are submerged after rain, or most of the times they are submerged. If you go in the summers, you can see these temples on Panchaganga Ghat. It's very beautiful. Or even in general, in whichever time you go, visiting Panchaganga Ghat would be surreal. The another water heritage which I have to mention here is Rankara. Like, if you don't visit Rankara, your Kolhapur trip is not completed. It is a ritual that you have to do. But after you have seen all these things, this museum, these palaces, these temples, you want time to sink in Kolhapuri culture. You want a moment to take all these things in, and then you visit this Rankara. This is a beautiful lake in the middle of the city. On the one side, there's another palace which is probably close to the people. It's called Shalini Palace, but you can see that from outside. Then there are all the bhelwalas, all sorts of chat you can eat around. Still, if you want to eat, there's a boating available in the Rankara lake. And actually, the name of Rankara, again, we have to connect to Mahalakshmi temple. So there is this deity called Ranka Bhairav, who is actually guardian of Mahalakshmi, or probably Rakshak of Mahalakshmi temple or her land. And in his name, this lake got the name Rankara. So So actually, when there were so many temples were being built, you need basalt or you need stone. So in those times, actually, there is mentioning of this Shilahara king Gandaraditya. He built around 360 Jain temples in and around vicinity. So to build all these massive mammoth structures, you need stone. So the stone was quarried from Rankara, and then a few centuries down the line, there was a big earthquake, which actually opened the quarry more and brought the water in. And since this, it became iconic spot of the city. So you can take a walk around this. There are so many parks there, and just you can see the another shore from wherever you are sitting, and another aspect of Kolhapur, and just sink in the Kolhapur trick in general by sitting at Rankala.
What better way to cap off such a wonderful trip, wonderful journey, wonderful experience in Kolhapur that literally has something to offer for everybody, right? It's not just history or not just architecture or not just museums or not just nature, right? It has a bit of everything, and I think just sitting and, like you said, just letting it all sink in, watching the sunset at Rankala is probably the best way to do justice to this entire journey. So thank you so much for so beautifully capturing all of these moments for us and taking us literally on a virtual trip around Kolhapur, Amrita. Really, really appreciate you sharing this experience with us.
Thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak with you and all the listeners. It's like a dream came true, frankly speaking. And it actually, I used to go to Kolhapur like so many times, and it also gave me a chance to walk down the memory lane. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. The pleasure is absolutely ours, and we will definitely look forward to hearing more stories from you, more places from in and around Maharashtra. Thank you so much, Amrita.
Thank you.
That was yet another great episode on the Musafir Stories. Make sure to show us some love by sharing the podcast with your friends and family. We are on Instagram and Twitter at Musafir Stories. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or the website. Follow us on our social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram.